the city of lights and its shadows. The image the whole world has of Paris is that of a true dream. The Eiffel Tower touching the sky, a city full of historical buildings, works of art scattered throughout the streets, and charming avenues where elegant people stroll leisurely. And let's be honest, this side exists. Couples in love on the bridges over the Seine, admiring Notre Dame and savoring a warm croissant while watching the comings and goings of Parisians is part of the unique experience that only Paris can provide. The City of Lights attracts millions of people annually, seduced by its charm and aura of sophistication. However, like every great metropolis, Paris hides a less glamorous side under its veneer of beauty, ignored by tourist guides, a side marked by social problems, violence and neglect, which can turn the Parisian dream into a nightmare. Robberies, scams, violence, prostitution, and even a kind of open drug scene. And of course, we can't forget the rats that roam freely in the corners of the city. Ready to discover the other side of the French capital? Then join us, because today, Hidden Truths will show you the dark corners of the City of Lights. Before we start, remember to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our publications. Without further ado, let's go. Tourist traps, thefts and scams. The first problem we are going to address is pickpockets and scams. This is a problem that many people are unaware of until it is too late. Tourists, captivated by the beauty of the city, become easy prey for opportunistic criminals. Scams are rampant in Paris, especially against unsuspecting tourists. Have you ever heard of the famous pickpockets? If you've researched tourism in Europe, you've probably come across this term at some point. It refers to pickpockets, those discreet thieves who, in the blink of an eye, disappear with your cell phone, wallet or passport. And in Paris, they are everywhere, especially in the busiest tourist spots. The metro, tourist spots and crowded areas are transformed into a stage for the quick action of experienced thieves. The strategy is simple. They watch for who is distracted, usually someone marveling at the city, checking a map or cell phone. When the metro stops and the doors open, the thief acts quickly, grabs whatever is easy to carry and runs off before the victim realizes what has happened. The door closes, the train continues on its journey, and that's the end of the story. But the scams don't end there. There's also the classic shell game, that street scam where someone hides a small ball under 3 cups and challenges onlookers to guess where it is. Sounds easy, right? Well, it's not. Around the scammer, there are accomplices pretending to win to attract more victims, and in the end, the tourist always loses, whether it's their wallet or any object that the criminals consider valuable. Another very common scam occurs inside metro stations. Fake uniformed inspectors take advantage of the hustle and bustle in crowded places, such as the station that leads to Disneyland Paris. They approach tourists who don't know exactly how the ticket system works and, pretending to help, charge exorbitant fares to let them through. And anyone who goes up to Montmartre or visits the Sacré-Cœur Basilica should be aware of the bracelet scam. A friendly guy approaches you and ties a string bracelet on your wrist, saying it's a gift. It seems harmless, but as soon as the bracelet is tied, he demands money to release it. If you refuse, the situation can become tense. The advice to avoid these headaches: avoid interacting with strangers. The feeling of insecurity, initially subtle, increases with each story of theft or scam reported by other visitors. Violence hidden in Parisian alleys. Violence, although not exclusive to Paris, also stains the streets of the city. The French capital, once considered one of the safest cities in Europe, has faced a significant increase in crime rates. Street fights, especially in outlying areas or at night, are not uncommon. Theft, robbery, and even violent crime have become more common, especially in tourist areas and on public transport, creating a climate of apprehension in certain regions. A recent example was the case of a young Brazilian woman who, along with her friends, was the victim of a brutal assault in an apartment rented through Airbnb. 7 armed men broke into the house, assaulted the victims, and attempted to sexually assault them. Fortunately, the victims managed to escape, but the trauma and fear remained. This event, which had a great impact, is just one of many accounts of violence that occur on the streets of Paris. The authorities, however, often downplay safety concerns and prefer to treat victims with indifference. When the young women went to the police, they were treated with prejudice and insensitivity. Police officers insinuated that the victims were prostitutes based on the medication and condoms in their bags. And the worst part is that, upon returning to the apartment after the forensic examinations, the victims were subjected to another kind of violence. They were evicted by the landlord, who cancelled the reservation for security reasons. Unfortunately, this type of situation is not an isolated case. There are numerous similar accounts of people who have experienced violence, discrimination, and even been treated with hostility by the French authorities. Now let's talk about a less glamorous subject, but one that directly affects the city: the pollution of the Seine River. Talking about Paris without mentioning the Seine River is practically impossible. It crosses the city, embellishes postcards, and is the setting for romantic cruises that make anyone sigh. But behind this enchanting scenery, the river has been suffering a much less glamorous reality for decades: pollution. It is not for nothing that for a long time no one dared to even dip their toes in these waters, as it was forbidden. Until the authorities had a bold idea for the 2024 Olympic Games. With the arrival of the Olympic Games, the Paris City Council decided to tackle the problem head-on. Millions of euros were invested to try to make the waters of the Seine suitable for swimming, as some competitions were scheduled to be held there. The idea was so ambitious that Mayor Hidalgo even took a symbolic dip to show her confidence in the decontamination efforts. But in practice, the story was different. High levels of bacteria, especially the dreaded Escherichia coli, which can cause serious infections, caused the postponement and even cancellation of some events. To make matters worse, some athletes who ventured into its waters came out feeling sick, and some were hospitalized, which only increased criticism and distrust among the population. Paris, a city world famous for its beauty, history, and culture, is not just the dream city everyone imagines. Behind the glamorous facades, there are grim realities and problems that are part of everyday life for those who live in or visit the French capital. And while the city remains an iconic tourist destination, we cannot ignore the urban challenges it faces, from the rats that live alongside Parisians to the pickpockets who make tourist distraction an opportunity. The Seine River, one of the most romantic images of Paris, also faces pollution challenges that directly affect its image and public health. These are just some of the less talked about aspects, but they are part of the reality of those who venture to discover Paris beyond the glamour of the photographs. The problem is that you can't solve decades of neglect with short-term solutions. Even if the sewer system is improved, all it takes is one heavy rainfall for the network to overload and discharge waste directly into the Seine River. And it's not just sewage. Oil, chemical waste, and tons of household garbage also contribute to the problem. Some activists went so far as to stage protests, ironizing about the decontamination project, calling the situation a bath of illusion. After all, swimming in the Seine is still a risk and not one worth taking. However, the problem of pollution in the Seine River is just the tip of the iceberg. Paris, the city of lights, has many other issues that, unlike its illuminated towers, remain in the shadows. The city that enchants tourists from all over the world with its historical and cultural beauty is also a place of contrasts, where social inequality and urban problems continue to grow without an effective solution. On many occasions, these problems are swept under the rug, or rather, out of sight of tourists. But for those who live and work in the city, these issues are a constant. The sex market, prostitution in Paris. Prostitution, one of the oldest professions in the world, also finds its place on the streets of Paris. In specific areas such as Pigalle and the Bois de Boulogne, the activity becomes more evident, with the presence of sex workers waiting for clients. At night, these areas are transformed into centers of prostitution, and the problem is even more serious when it comes to human trafficking. Women, many of them victims of criminal networks, are forced into prostitution in these areas, often under threat of and extreme violence. The situation is alarming, but not very visible to the general public, as most tourists do not usually frequent these places at night. However, for those who know the reality, what they see is a network of sexual exploitation that involves physical violence, forced labor, and even the presence of minors. NGOs fighting against trafficking and sexual exploitation denounce these practices, but government action is limited and has not been enough to combat the criminal networks that prey on the vulnerability of women and children. Parisian drug scene. A shocking reality. The drug problem, unfortunately, is no stranger to Paris. It is a serious problem that has been gaining prominence in recent years. If you think places like Sao Paulo or Los Angeles are the only ones facing this situation, you are very much mistaken. Paris, the most romantic city in the world, also has its own version of an open drug scene, a brutal portrait of drug addiction and social exclusion, and it is as devastating as that of other metropolises. If you haven't seen it yet, there are reports that show a bleak panorama on the streets, with drug addicts in areas such as Porte de la Chapelle and Porte de la Villette. Near the Stalingrad metro station, crack users congregate in a makeshift camp, using the drug and living in precarious conditions, where the police try to act, but never manage to eradicate the problem at its root. Instead, it seems that the problem is only temporarily displaced, and the drug addicts return weeks later in a cycle that seems to have no end. The situation is even more serious because of the impact it has on public safety. Residents report constant robberies, threats, and a growing sense of insecurity. Local businesses, which depend on the flow of tourists and residents, are suffering from the decline in activity. Many small businesses are being forced to close their doors as the presence of drug addicts drives away customers and creates a hostile environment. The government, for its part, seems more concerned with hiding this problem than with finding lasting solutions. Police actions, such as cleanup operations in which tents are removed and users dispersed, are considered a palliative measure, a band-aid that does not solve the real problem of drug addiction and social exclusion. The presence of this open drug scene shocks and disturbs residents and visitors alike, highlighting the cruelty of social inequality. In addition to the open drug scene, there is another equally alarming issue in Paris: the increase in homelessness. The housing crisis and the cost of living in the city are determining factors in the growth of the population living on the streets. The grand avenues and even the central areas, which should be symbols of the wealth and elegance of Paris, are being occupied by makeshift shacks of canvas and plastic, where illegal immigrants and French people with economic difficulties try to survive. The crisis is visible in places like the banks of the Seine River, where the idyllic landscape of the city mixes with the harsh reality of those who have nowhere to live. These shacks, which spring up in tourist spots and along central avenues, are a reflection of the lack of effective public policies to address urban poverty. Many of these people rely on NGOs for food and shelter, but the actions are insufficient to meet the growing demand. The government, on many occasions, chooses to sweep the problem under the rug, especially during major events, such as fashion shows or Olympic competitions. At such times, the city council carries out a cleanup, removing the shacks and evicting the homeless, only for the problem to be shifted elsewhere, out of sight of tourists and television cameras. But these temporary measures do not solve the structural issue of homelessness and social inequality. The invisible inhabitants, the rat plague, and the penultimate point on our list, and perhaps the most unusual, a silent and uncomfortable presence accompanies Parisians in their daily lives: rats. The city, with its vast sewer system and the large amount of garbage generated daily, offers a feast for these rodents. Remember that scene from the movie Ratatouille with a cute and talented little rat who becomes a chef in Paris? Well, the reality of the coexistence between Parisians and rats is a little, or a lot, less pretty than in the animated film. Scenes like this, in which a rat roams freely on the Paris metro, climbs on sleeping passengers, or rides on dogs, have gone viral on the internet. Parks, gardens, and even areas near restaurants become the setting for the circulation of these animals. Yes, they are everywhere and are part of the Parisian landscape, like the Eiffel Tower. The funny thing is that nobody seems to be scared or care. Paris's relationship with rats goes back a long way. During the Middle Ages, they were feared as carriers of the bubonic plague, which decimated thousands of lives. Back in the 19th century, during the siege of Paris in the Franco-Prussian War, starving Parisians even ate rats to survive. And believe it or not, at that time they used rodent skins to make fine gloves for the elite. It is estimated that Paris has about 6 million rats. That is 3 times more rodents than people. Today, the city council is trying to tackle the plague in another way, opting for so-called peaceful cohabitation, with less aggressive control measures. But the truth is that the rats are still there, ready to take advantage of any carelessness. When garbage piles up, they have a feast. Garbage collection strikes are common in Paris, and all it takes is one stoppage for the streets to be filled with plastic bags, a real paradise for rodents. In 2023, a prolonged strike left unsuspecting tourists facing scenes worthy of a horror movie. Some streets were practically impassable, and even tourist areas such as the Champ de Mars became fiefdoms of hungry rodents. For some Parisians, rats are already part of the landscape. In many cafes and restaurants, it is normal to see one running by, and the waiters don't even bother to hide it. Faced with the difficulty of controlling the plague, Paris has come up with an unusual solution, an app to map rat sightings. It works like a rodent Waze. People can report in real time the places where they have seen one, helping the city council to direct control actions. As soon as the app was launched, reports skyrocketed. It became clear that rats are not confined to sewers and dark alleys. They are in the trendiest neighborhoods, on the metro, and even in iconic tourist spots, generating disgust and public health concerns. Xenophobia and prejudice are also serious issues in Paris. Although the city is known for its cultural diversity, it still faces a serious problem of discrimination. People of North African, Black and Roma origin face constant difficulties in integrating into the labor market, suffer dirty looks, and are often victims of physical violence. In many cases, discrimination goes beyond mere stereotypes and becomes real violence, as was evident in an attack in December 2022, when a man stormed a Kurdish cultural center and killed 3 people. This attack was motivated by racial hatred and is a reflection of the climate of intolerance that still pervades French society. Conclusion: between charm and disillusionment, Paris, the city of lights, enchants and fascinates, offering its visitors a unique experience. However, one must be aware of the reality that hides behind the romantic facade. The city, like any great metropolis, faces complex problems that require attention and effective solutions. It is up to the Parisian authorities to find the balance between glamour and security, ensuring that the magic of Paris is not overshadowed by the shadow of neglect. If you liked today's video, please support us by giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the Hidden Truths channel. Your participation is what keeps us going. Don't forget to check out the video that appears on the screen now. I'm sure you'll find it fascinating. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.